All right, I just distributed to you guys a file that contains a virtual machine. That came from my hard drive here. And the file that you're working with is a VHD file. It's a virtual hard drive file, and there's different file formats. The previous virtual machine I gave to you guys, the Windows 8 one, that was a VDI file, which tends to work better on VMware servers. VirtualBox doesn't really care too much. In fact, most of the VM software doesn't care too much what the format is, but there's certain formats that are a little more preferable for working with Windows. And Windows does prefer the VHD format, which is virtual hard drive. That's what it stands for. And it's really a good name for it because that's in essence what we have here. We have one file that takes the place of a hard drive. All right, so that acts as a hard drive. So that's the file I provided for you. It looks like it's about 42 gigs, right in that range. I'll be using VirtualBox for this demonstration. So what you're going to want to do is launch that piece of software. If you're running this on a machine other than the school machine, VirtualBox is available absolutely for free. If you just type VirtualBox with no spaces, it'll take you right to that spot. So you would go right to Oracle's website for VirtualBox, and they have a download page, and you would download for whatever your operating system is. So that's helpful to know. Now, when it comes to settings, and you have VirtualBox up and running, you just very simply click New if it's a new virtual machine. Give it a name, whatever is meaningful. Type in something verbose, like, for example, when we did the Windows 8.1 one, see how I did Win 8.1, Visual Studio 15, SharePoint Dev, like see the acronyms that I used in there. For you guys, if you're using a deep frozen machine, it will not. You have to make these settings every time. So you'll get familiar with this after a while. So give it a name, and I'm just calling it SP1 for right now. You are loading Windows, but it's not Windows 7 or Windows 8. You're loading Windows 2012. That's a server operating system. So Windows 2012 64-bit. When you go to the next screen, it will ask you for the amount of RAM. Notice that here it says recommended size is 2 megs. No. This is Windows Server. It's not a regular operating system. You really need to get it up to ideally 8 gigs of RAM. That would be the recommended. 8 gigs of RAM would list as 8192. Notice on my machine, I have a total of 12 gigs. I think that's the same you have on those laptops. So it really does not give you any space for much else. You do not want to go out of that green zone, though. So when you are running the virtual machine, you do not want to be running a lot of stuff in Windows. It's not that you can't. It would really tax your machine very heavily. All right, so set that to 8 gigs. And now you'll come up to a screen that says choose your hard disk type, right? And it says create a virtual hard disk now. That's what you would do if you're starting from scratch and needed to install an operating system like you would on a computer. But in this case, you already have the file, so you just come in here and locate that file wherever it is that you put it on your machine. For me, it's right here. And I just point to it. And then I click Create. Once that Create button is clicked, I'm not going to click that because I already have a definition like that created. You'll get a listing on your left side of the screen in VirtualBox that has the name of the machine. And at that point, you can go in and adjust additional settings as necessary. There are some settings I do recommend that you make right off the bat. One of the more important ones is the number of processors that you're running. So if you go to the System tab and then click on Processor, I strongly recommend that you up that to 2. And you can see mine's only set for 1, so I'm actually going to up it to 2. Once again, stay in the green area. Because this is a 64-bit machine, assigning 2 processors to it basically ensures the fact that you're going to run in 64-bit mode as opposed to like an interpolated 32-bit. So stay with 2 CPUs. And if you want to change any other settings here, feel free. But basically everything else should really be kind of intuitive. I mean, there's display settings. You know, I recommend upping that video memory all the way up if you want good performance. That's not really that critical though. It's not like it's accessing your video card. Anywhere in the green zone should be okay, but higher is better. What other key ones do we have here? Nothing really of note too much. If you are going to connect USB 3 devices that you're going to read and write with, you might want to consider changing these settings. It really shouldn't be the case though. And then the other one you might want to consider are some of these settings that allow you to copy and paste between machines, but I think that's actually done outside of here. So those are really the settings that you need. Make sure you got at least 8 gigs of RAM, you connect to the virtual hard drive, 64-bit Windows, and 2 CPUs. So if you remember those settings, you might not remember them the first time, but they're really pretty basic. And you're playing with a virtual machine here, there's nothing really to break. If you're worried about ruining the virtual machine, make a copy of that hard drive file in its original state and leave it alone, and then have one that you just work on. Because it's a virtual hard drive, any of the work that you do inside that environment will persist, just like it does on a regular computer. My strong recommendation, though, is whenever you're done working with the machine, shut it down within the virtual machine, and that way it's much more transportable. If you leave it in its current state, let's say you set it for 8 gigs of RAM, and then you go to a machine where it can't do that much, it'll choke. And you have to go back to the 8 gig machine to switch it. If you are challenged for performance on your host system, you can think about dropping that RAM amount down to 6 gigs, but I would do that very, very tentatively and understand that it's really going to run slowly.
You would only want to do one or the other on our computers, right? Like one, the first one, the last one, you download that's right.
If you have a machine that has enough RAM, there's no reason why you can't run multiple virtual machines at the same time. It absolutely works. But these machines running Windows Server, you got to remember Windows. This is a server operating system. It's not. It looks like Windows 8, but it's Windows Server. So it's got a lot different capabilities, and it operates in a different fashion than Windows 8 does. You have the face of Windows 8 that you're interacting with, but you have a completely different set of tools that sit underneath, and it does a lot of different things. So you probably want to know the password for it too, right? That would probably be helpful. All right, so the login is administrator, and the password is the same thing that I think I gave you guys before, and this is the one that Microsoft uses for all their stuff, as this. Capital P A $W 0 RD. The login name is administrator. Hypothetically, no, but I always type a capital. All right, that's it for this video. Hopefully that'll be helpful.